Isn't it amazing that it's been 4 years since we launched Project Day School Excellence, our systemic vision idea to bring professional development to the Jewish day schools in Miami. We had this idea after coming back from a Learning Forward conference that we really needed to do this in a planful, systemic way. And it's amazing where we are in the implementation continuum 4 years later.
You're right. I remember sitting in the room with all of the participants, and professional development to them had basically been bring all the schools together for one day in February, and everybody just goes to a different workshop and then they go home. And here we said to them, you know what, let's put all of our assumptions aside, take a risk, just put everything you know about professional development aside. We're going to take you on a journey, and it's really been a journey, and they did that. And we asked the schools to just trust us on this. One of the things that I think we've both learned a lot about is change, and how change is really very personal, and it's about one person at a time, and there's so many things that people are concerned with when a new initiative, a new innovation is introduced. You have to think about the people, you have to think about the individual, the teams, the school, right. And everybody's at a different place, and really that's a critical piece of understanding the implementation standard. Is you really need to look at who your audience is, who your participants are, and help them understand the process, bring them into the process, and help them move along the process as an individual, as a team, as a faculty, as a school. And that's been really, really a powerful message that we've learned through this whole project.
I think one of the things we've learned a lot about is not only the research about change, but just the experience of change, that we can read all about the various phases that people go through and institutions go through, but we've experienced it on the ground with people and with leaders who have had to put aside assumptions and who have had to take risks, who have had to do things in new ways. And I think just learning how to manage that process on our end from a communal perspective, and also helping leaders in schools manage that back at home when they have schools that are very entrenched in decades and decades of ways that they do things. And I think to see some of our schools creating learning communities and teaming in different ways and understanding the importance of data just goes to show that if you have fidelity to the process, you really can make a difference.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important about the school leaders and their critical role. A lot of our schools really succeeded at this work because their leaders were at the table every step of the way, and they were the ones that were shepherding their faculty through the process, and they really invested their time. They walked the walk. And the leaders in those schools really understood that this is a powerful model for change and for improving student learning. And one of the things we really emphasized was that this is all about the students, and the role of the leader is critical in the implementation phase. It's just something that you can't do without it. And I think that that's one of the things that we really learned in this process. The schools that did have those leaders and that kind of model really, really soared with this work. It's ongoing. 3 to 5 years is when you really start to see implementation and really start to see the change take place. But this is ongoing, because once that change has taken place, you find something else that needs to be improved upon. And so you just it's a continuous cycle of improvement, and it really, that's what it's all about. Students are learning, teachers are learning, school leaders are learning, and it's about constantly moving forward together.
I think also going back to something about the importance that implementation is about taking the knowing, breaching the knowing the doing gap. And we talk about that a lot, about how we can do all the training and all of the workshops, and we have our leadership academies where we try and really work on the content and the skills and the strategies, but then going back to the schools and actually implementing those strategies, or thinking about how to apply that knowledge to their culture and their setting. That systemic support, that support system, which we've created with coaches, which we've tried to do with lay leadership, which we've tried to do with school leaders, that is so critical in implementation, is having high quality knowing experience, getting the knowing part, and then just as high quality and sophisticated means of getting the doing happening. And then teaching people how to collect data to see if they're really doing it.
Another piece that we introduced early on was the Coaches Academy.
Right.
And we've already had 2 cohorts and
Right.
close to 60 coaches in the schools. And the idea is for those coaches to be for those coaches, we've built the capacity of people within the school
Right.
to be able to support their colleagues through the implementation process. So we're finding the coaches are doing observation and feedback with their peers. They're also facilitating professional learning communities, introducing a new strategy to certain grade levels as appropriate. It's really been transformative, and those coaches, some of them are young novice teachers and some of them are more veteran teachers, and they've all been energized by this process. And speaking of our system, I think one of the most fantastic outcomes of this that was totally unintended, and we've talked about this so many times, is just the network of schools and how the conversations among schools have changed dramatically. It's not competitive. It's really very much about student achievement and putting the student in the middle and saying, what do our students need to succeed? And you can have schools that have completely different missions coming together to have a conversation about quality student work and about what it takes to really improve the level of teaching and learning in the school.
Right, not only missions, I mean, significantly different cultures
And populations.
and populations who would never speak to each other.
Right, and now they're sitting at the table and having these conversations and really open conversations about what's going on in their schools and how to improve their schools, and visiting each other's schools.
Right.
That's really been, and even coaching each other, that's been,
Right.
that's really something very important about implementation, is not staying within your own silo and not staying within your own classroom and not staying within your own school, but really seeing what's out there and putting it into practice, bringing what works for your setting and bringing it into your schools.
I also think the fact that we really encouraged involvement in the national, in a national organization, and that part of our systemic approach was providing opportunities for educators to go out and participate in conferences where people like the Learning Forward conference were really talking about this stuff at high level and engaging with that, and not just coming back to their schools and saying, I went to this great conference, but coming back where we as the local agency could then support the work, could then continue the work, could bring that a little closer to home, so that they could take that knowledge, that new knowledge, and really integrate it. I think the integration piece and the support for integration is so important. You talk about some of the coaches that are coaching veteran teachers. It's not easy to have those difficult conversations, because when you do have shared vision and shared goals, sometimes they're not being met, or sometimes you're encountering a stumbling block. How do you have that conversation with somebody who's been doing this the way they've been doing it forever, and now you need to change that up a bit in order to meet new goals? So that's a very delicate skill, and I think that because of the Coaches Academy and kind of teaching people to do that, and creating schools where those kinds of dialogues are not career enders or whatever it is, and that you really creating that culture is so important. And I think also just the whole idea that we approach this systemically. I mean, it's almost like we didn't even realize what we were doing when we did it. We just had kind of learned about this whole concept of standards and all the different pieces, and came to Learning Forward and said, we really want to do this well. We have time. We're looking at a long-term investment, and I think that when you try and do things too fast, they don't work. We saw that happen so many times. But this Project Day School Excellence really had a systemic underpinning to it. It had that systemic support for implementation. And while we changed the timelines and we changed the benchmarks at different points, because we did that formative assessment even with the project. We had an evaluator, we kind of figured out, this is working, this isn't working, and we changed it up, all with the same goal, but sometimes the journey was not such a straight line. And I think that was hard for us, because we like to set the goals, get to the goal, get to the next goal, and in this situation, you have to have the ability to be flexible and patient with mistakes and all of those kinds of things.